Hello, my name's Bryony. I'm a speech and language therapist and I work with young children and their families. And in the course of my work and my life, I have the pleasure of meeting lots of autistic individuals. And together we are learning how to better understand each other and what adjustments we can make so that we are successfully communicating together. Here on my channel, I've shared lots of activity ideas around building attention, developing expression, sharing play together, and I'll link some highlights below. But for today, I wanted to take it right back to one of those first questions that you might be searching up on the internet. If your child is struggling to communicate, then autism might be on your radar as one of those things that you want to know more about. There's a risk to searching things up online, right? Because we can end up looking through a lot of information, a bit of a middle of the night doom scroll situation. Today I wanted to contribute to tipping the balance in giving you a different perspective on autism, informed by our diagnostic manuals and our research that isn't all doom and gloom. This is my perspective as a speech and language therapist working with autistic people for a long time, but I'm not autistic myself. A lot of my learning has also come from listening to people who are actually autistic. And I will link some websites below as well, because if we are seeking to better understand and better support autism, it's really essential that we start by listening to people who have that lived experience, who are autistic and who are doing the work to share with the wider world and help us to develop our understanding and perspective of the autistic experience. So that is a preamble, and now let's dive into some of the details. Autism is fundamentally a difference in how someone experiences and interacts with the world around them. If you're not autistic yourself, then it might be that sometimes it's hard for you to understand or make sense of the behaviours of an autistic person. If you search up a diagnostic definition of autism, you may come across mention of the ICD-10 or the DSM-5. These are the two main diagnostic manuals used around the world, which aim to classify and describe the details of every medical condition out there. The main features of autism that you will come across within these diagnostic manuals is difficulties with social communication and interaction, and restrictive and repetitive behaviours, activities and interests. If you look further into the descriptive details from the diagnostic manuals, you might come across language like abnormalities, impairment, disorder. And that doesn't have to be the story that we tell about autism. We can still be detailed in describing what we're seeing to inform our plans and our support without having to use this primarily impairment-based language. Now, that's not to say that autistic people don't experience many difficulties within the everyday world. I'm sure if you're on the autism spectrum or your child is, you could tell me some very real challenges that you encounter. And a lot of that is because the world is not very autism friendly. Places can be loud, people can be vague, situations can be unpredictable. And still, the language that we use matters. And we can choose to use different language when we're describing autism that is still grounded in verifiable observations and the research. So with that in mind, let's look at those two main broad descriptive categories and think about what we're really talking about there and if there's another way to describe it. Firstly, let's look at difficulties with social interaction and communication. Really, what we're describing is differences, and key to this is the research around the double empathy problem. We used to think that autistic people struggled to understand the thoughts and feelings of another person. We used to talk about poor theory of mind. Now we're learning that that is kind of a two-way challenge. It's almost like a culture clash. So yes, autistic people can find it difficult to understand or take perspective on the thoughts and feelings of neurotypical people, and vice versa. Neurotypical people can struggle to take perspective on an autistic person's thoughts and feelings. And also we're learning that amongst autistic people, their social communication skills are really effective. Between them, thinking about it almost as a culture, they get it, they're successful. Now, of course, there's lots more detail to this, which we won't go into today, but you might want to, amidst your online searching, find out more about the double empathy problem, because it helps us to understand what we're talking about when we're describing those differences in social interaction. Relevant to this part of the descriptor, these differences in social interaction and communication, is the need to acknowledge that lots of autistic people struggle to get their message across. Communication can be hard. I certainly, as a speech and language therapist, meet lots of children who need additional support in getting their message across. Again, lots more detail for another video, but for now, I would just like to acknowledge that we really want to be thinking about communication as a multimodal thing. I mean, look at me, I can't help but use my hands and my face, and you know, if we were in person, we'd be using our bodies as well. We are all multimodal communicators, and we want to think about how we can make that accessible. What tools, what support can we give an autistic child, an autistic adult, so that they can be successful in communicating their message in all situations. So that is a much more detailed topic. If you're interested to find out more, then do hit subscribe. I'll make a video on that topic in the future. Okay, let's talk about our second main descriptor, restrictive and repetitive behaviours, activities and interests. We could describe this as the ability to focus deeply on something of interest. Some autistic people will describe a strong pull towards their areas of interest. Some will describe almost an attention tunnel, and they're really skilled at following their attention and really focusing deeply. The challenge is when they're required to stop what they're doing or shift their attention or stop what they're talking about in order to listen to someone else. Monotropism can explain the pull towards giving lots of detail in your answer. I meet lots of children who struggle to give me a one-phrase summary of something that happened or a story that they read, but they are incredible experts at giving me lots of the details within that event or that story. So in addition to these main two descriptors when we're thinking about autism, it's also really important to acknowledge that lots of autistic people have a different sensory profile. So they might experience sensory information a little bit differently than a neurotypical person would. So this might mean that some things feel very brash, harsh, loud, or some things might seem very kind of muted and hard to really notice. So we might describe what we're seeing as sensory avoidant or sensory seeking. So that might relate to sounds or textures or visual information. And so we have this contrast where maybe some things are very kind of where the sensory system is overactive or underfed. It's a much wider topic, but I always find, whilst I'm not a sensory specialist, that it's really relevant to my work as a speech and language therapist to acknowledge that the room that we're in together, the sounds that we're hearing, the things that we're exploring may be experienced very differently by the child than by me. And this helps me to be more empathetic and more tuned into the details of how they're responding, because there's clues in that, there's communicative clues. Of course, I work with very young children where they're just starting to explore and experience the world and figure out how to share that with me and with the other people around them. I aim to be pro-neurodiversity in my practice, which means embracing autism, doing work to better understand what that really means and to help an autistic individual to better understand it for themselves and to make sure that everyone around them can also understand what their unique profile is and what adjustments we can make, what support we can provide so that everyone is successfully communicating, interacting and having fun together. So I hope that this adds to your understanding of autism and gives you a choice about how you might want to frame it and what information you might want to dig into further. The medical world may have you believe that your child is broken and needs fixing, and that's simply not true. We all have a lot to learn and unlearn. Your child is marvelous, just as they are. If you've got any more specific questions that you have, please feel free to pop them in the comments. And if you think that there's room for us to continue to be more affirming, more positive, and more celebratory of the diverse neurological experiences out there, then please give this a thumbs up. It helps this video reach more people. Thank you so much for being here. You're doing awesome. Keep going, and remember, every tiny step that we take together is a step in the right direction. Till next time, I'll see you around.